Thank you all for joining us for the Inclusive Teaching Practices Workshop. Joining today is Alison Slutz, Associate Professor in Residence College of Sciences. They're going to discuss the ways in which instructors can create inclusive learning environments and a variety of strategies they may consider adopting in their classroom. I'm going to hand it over to them to get started.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like you to please share in the chat what classes you teach, either the subject or the class, so I can get an idea of where you might need help. And you can do that while I'm sharing my screen. Okay, and if you do not teach any classes, in what subject are you getting your degree? So I can anticipate what classes you might teach. Okay, so design fundamentals, okay. Kinesiology, emergency management, illness and injury, okay. Okay, thank you, Lissa. Okay, India, Masters in Couples and Family Therapy, okay. Sylvester, information management, okay. Anyone else? Bruno, what classes do you teach? Okay. And then Curtis. Anyone else teach any other classes? Hospitality. Okay, Bruno, English. Okay. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I'll just introduce myself a little bit. I received my PhD from UNLV. I was in your shoes not that long ago. I received my PhD in 2014 in geoscience. I am a geologist. I teach classes in the College of Sciences. I teach the first year seminar, the second year seminar, and some geology courses. So I was in your shoes not that long ago, and I started to attend a lot of workshops like this to try to improve my teaching and try to get my students a little bit more engaged and a little bit more active. And so I'm going to share some of those techniques with you today to help make your class a little bit more inclusive and to improve the learning in your class. Okay. Why is my slide? Here we go. Okay. So far, as you have been teaching, what is one strategy that has worked well for you? So please share in the chat something that has worked well for you and maybe why you think it has worked well. Or maybe nothing has worked well for you and that's why you're here. So please share either your successes or your struggles. Okay, so Bruno gives students choice. That's an excellent technique. Yes, that works really well. When students can have some autonomy in choosing what they want to do. Anyone else do something that works well? Okay, so Lissa teaches remotely. Yeah, so Lissa checks in with students, talks about personal goals, and that helps participation. Yes, so teaching remotely is obviously very difficult for everybody, but checking in on them really does help. Yes, absolutely. Okay, Joshua in kinesiology does discovery-based practices. Okay, providing students with a question or task that requires information they haven't covered yet. Working in groups. Yes, so they want to know the answer if they've struggled with the activity, absolutely. So that's one of the techniques we're going to talk about today. When you give students a question or ask them about something they don't know yet, that's a really good way to kind of pique their curiosity and they want to know the answer. So that's a great technique. Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of these different things today. And I have today's talk divided up into 5 main parts. So we're going to talk about what you can do before you go to class, before your students even enter your classroom. We're going to talk about the first 3 minutes of class, things you can do during class to make your room and your classroom more inclusive, and then things you can do after class to help your students be successful. So we're going to talk about all of these different things and then have a little Q&A at the end. So one of the things you can do before class even starts is revamp your syllabus. And you may think, nobody reads the syllabus. I don't really need to rework my syllabus, but some students do. And you can look at your syllabus and you can ask yourself, does my syllabus read like a legal contract? Is it full of jargon? Or is it welcoming and does it help explain how to be successful in my class? And so sometimes just tweaking some small little things in your syllabus can really help set the tone, make it more welcoming, and explain how to succeed in your class. So an equity-minded syllabus, that's what this is called, an equity-minded syllabus can do this. So if you explain jargon, things like office hours. Many students don't really understand what office hours are. And so if you change the wording and you explain what some of these terms mean, it makes it much more accessible to most of your students. And so things like office hours, if you change office and put in student hours and explain that your student hours are for them. They can come to you with any questions they have. And even if it's not really about your class, and you are there to help them during that time. And so I have an example here. This is one of the classes I teach. I have a welcoming message where I explain a little bit about what the class is going to be about and why I'm excited to teach this class. And then I explain something about me, including the student hours. So if you explain jargon, it can be really helpful. If you think back to when you were a student, if you were starting out, if no one told you what office hours were, would you really know what they are? Things like that. You can even explain things like the verbiage for the abbreviations for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some universities have strange abbreviations for some of the days of the week or a lab class. And so if you explain what that is, then it levels the playing field for everyone. Okay. Even things like credits or units Many students, especially first-year students, do not know what that means. So if you explain it to them, then it really can help a lot of students, especially first-generation students who may not really know what that is at all. Okay. Again, you can provide a welcome message, which really can set the tone also. So a lot of this works because rather than reading like a legal contract, your syllabus can be a welcoming document rather than something that is meant as more punishing. So welcoming is always better. This also works because it can demystify success. So we want everyone to succeed. We don't want to be a course that weeds out students. We want everyone to succeed in our class so that they can graduate from UNLV and move on in their careers. And so you can add even a section on how to succeed in this class. So if your class is 2 credits or 3 credits, you can explain how much time they are expected to spend in that class in terms of studying, because maybe no one has told them. If they have come from a high school where they did not have homework and they did not have to study, if you just say, oh, you have to go study, well, how much? How much am I supposed to study? It can really help. Things like you need to come to class on time. You need to bring a notebook and take notes. That can be really, really helpful. Not everyone knows that on the first day of school or first day of class. So little things like that can make a difference for students who either might be first generation or who may just be a little bit of a reminder. So I have, in my syllabus now, I have course materials because some students don't even bring paper. And if I have an assignment and they have to fill out something and turn it in, they need a piece of paper to do that. So does anyone already do something like this in their syllabus? You may not have complete control depending on your course, but has anyone put in a welcome message or how to succeed? Another thing you can do to try to normalize struggle is to talk about how much work your course is. That can really help because if students think, oh, I'm the only one who's working hard, I don't belong here because I'm having to work way harder than everyone else, that can really help because it can show them that everyone has to struggle, everyone has to work hard in this class. And no one knows this from high school because you weren't exposed to this in high school. And so everyone is going to struggle, and that's okay. And so another thing you can do that I have found that really works, I have a pie chart that shows the grade distribution. And so this really helps if a student is sick or they're absent or something happened and they miss, say, a little quiz or something, and they're really panicked because they missed a small assignment. If they look at the pie chart, they'll realize, okay, it's not that big of a deal that I missed this 2-point assignment because the distribution of my grade isn't going to be affected that badly. So that can sometimes help alleviate some fears about things that they may miss because they had a legitimate reason to miss it. And so that can sometimes be helpful. Okay, so Lista includes how to succeed, but not a welcoming message. Monique has a welcome message. Okay. Yeah, so, if you can find a way to have some sort of message in there that sparks their curiosity and does make them excited to learn about your class, then sometimes that you've surpassed that hurdle from the beginning. If they come in, their first exposure to your class is a document that seems punishing, that can set the tone. And they may think, I'm not going to be successful in this class. But if you have a welcome message that says, I want you to be successful, I will do whatever I can to help you, that can be really helpful. Lisa said someone in our class mentioned the syllabus like a love letter. Yeah. Yeah, it is a great start. Yeah. So I never thought about it that way. That's cute. Another thing that I have since added just this past semester, I've added a campus resources and emergency funding section, and it's at the very end of my syllabus. So it's the last 2 paragraphs. So that if students are struggling, if they need any kind of assistance or help, they know that it's at the very end. So click on those links. There's an emergency fund. Click on the link. If you need the food pantry, if you need the hours for the food pantry, if you need a bus pass, if you need help finding housing, things like that, then these are your resources. So they're easy to find. But also it shows that you are an ally for your students and you will help them figure out a way to be successful. We don't want these cost barriers to be a barrier to success, and often they are. So it's just another way to show that you are supporting your students in any way possible. Okay, so think of your syllabus. How can you change it or modify it to provide a welcoming tone? Or what jargon can you explain that maybe you never really thought about before? Or how can you demystify success or normalize struggle? So what are some things that you might try to change, even if you don't have complete control over your syllabus? You might have a little bit of leeway. What are you going to try to modify and make better? Okay, so Lissa thinks the pie chart would be interesting. Yeah, so Lissa, at the end of this presentation, I have some resources for some examples of when they've modified some syllabi. So take a look at some of those resources. It's really interesting. Um, Interesting look at ways to make your syllabus a little bit more welcoming. Even adding some pictures sometimes can really help. So I don't have a lot of pictures in my syllabus, but if like if you're doing something with microscopes, even if you put a picture of a microscope in there, or I don't know, something that you do that's visually appealing. So little things can make a difference. Anybody else? Anyone else have any ideas of things they may change or modify? Okay, so once you start class, there are some things you can do to make your class also more inclusive. And so I have used, I call them pretests. They aren't exactly tests. They're just open-ended questions. And these work really, really well. I've used this in all of my classes almost every single day. And within the first 3 minutes of class, I have an open-ended question. So as students come in, they look at the screen. It's always on a PowerPoint slide. They look at the screen and they have to start thinking immediately about science. And so it's usually something that either covers the last class or something that just sparks their curiosity that is meant to improve their critical thinking skills. And so usually these are really quick, they're fast, they are low stakes. Low stakes meaning they don't have a high point value. So there's not much risk for the students when if they either they don't come to class on time, or Something happens and they're late, it's not that big of a deal. If they miss every single one, it's a big deal. But they also don't have a lot of risk in terms of if they're completely wrong or if they just don't know the answer. So this is just an example of one of the pre-tests I give. I give them all throughout the semester, but just open-ended questions that work well to get them thinking. This also is nice because it serves as your attendance. So if you take attendance, then this can work in place of that if you need something to take attendance. Monique sometimes lets the students make up the questions. Yeah, so that's a great idea. Yeah, and then you don't have to, if you're busy, you don't have to think of the answer or the question. Okay, so one of the reasons this works too is it's often a reset button. So students come in, maybe they had a really bad first class and you're the second class of the day, or they had terrible traffic and they couldn't find parking, or they're really struggling with something. And this is a reset. So they come in, they have to start thinking about your class. And so I've seen it work. You can see the change in your students when they sit down and they start to think about this and provide their answers. So it really does work as a reset button. This also works because students they generally put their phone away. They put their phone away, they start to think about this and start to answer the questions. And that's why I really like this the best, because it gets them off their phone, they take off their backpack, and they get to work. um, it's also nice because, like at the beginning, someone said that they do something similar to this, and they want to know the answer, and that is very true. So if you pose some sort of question, they want to know. In this particular question about microplastics, they want to know, well, why are there microplastics everywhere? And so it's just a good way to start their critical thinking and build those critical thinking skills and their writing skills. It's also nice because it provides you with feedback immediately. You know what your students know, and they know what they know. Because sometimes maybe you talked about this last class and they either weren't there or they weren't paying attention and they realize, oh, I was supposed to know that from last class and I need to start paying attention. So it's another way that another reason why it works. So think of your course. Can you think of ways that you can build in consistent low stakes practice like these pretests? How can you start to add things like this into your course? I'll say also, I forgot to mention this earlier, a lot of the things that I build into my course, I pull from the news. So I'll read an interesting story on NPR or somewhere, I'll hear an interesting story on the way into work, and I'll just make that the question. And so just even news stories can be really, really impactful. Okay, listed as warm-up drawings. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's a good idea. Even if they don't like to draw or they think they're not good at it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're good or not. Yeah, so that's a good idea. Draw your desk, draw your breakfast. They draw nothing. Oh, that's cute, Lissa. Okay, so if you're teaching classes like some of you said you're teaching hospitality, MIS classes, it may be a little bit more challenging if you don't have those types of things in the news, but hopefully you can figure out a way to add some of those things in there. Yeah, Joshua, that's a great idea. Yeah, provide the opportunity to measure each other's blood pressure. Yeah. Yeah, the more you practice these things, the better you get. And that's the thing with these little low stakes quizzes. The more you practice answering these questions, the better students get at it. And that's one of the things that's really amazing. I showed you the slides. Let me go back. This one about the bird nests, when I asked students, how would you study this? And this is toward the beginning of the semester, their answers are really simple and often not very involved. And then toward the end of the semester, I asked them, how would you study this with the microplastics? And it's just amazing how much more involved and thoughtful their answers are because they've learned how to conduct scientific experiments by that point. And so it does show you how much your class has learned. And so it is rewarding from your end to do these little pretests throughout the semester. Okay, another thing that I do every day during class, if you are struggling with getting your students to talk to each other, I teach primarily science students, and they're pretty introverted. They don't really like to talk to each other unless I make them talk to each other. And so I do a lot of think, pair, share. And so think, pair, share is just a small little technique where you ask them a question, they think about it for 30 seconds, and then they pair up with someone around them and talk about their answer and then share it. And so this is really effective if you have introverted students who do not talk to each other. And so I'll just say, turn to the person next to you and talk about how you would solve this problem. And it really works because they're far more likely to share their thoughts with someone around them before they are in a general large group. So it gives people a chance to think about their answers. It gives them time to think about their answers. Um, if you have a class with really extroverted students who always come up with the answer before anyone else has time to think about their answers, it can be really effective to help that also. They're also more likely to share their answers, especially if the person they're talking to says, "Hey, that's a great idea," and they talk a little bit more about it, and they realize, "Oh, my thoughts are valid and they're good." And so it improves communication skills among everyone. So does anyone do this already? You might do this, you might just not have realized that it's called this. Or does anyone struggle with getting students to participate in class? Okay, so Monique does, yes. Yeah, I'm the same, Monique. Okay, so how do you think that you can include more small group discussions and include the more introverted students in your classes? I think one of the nice things about this too, with Think Pair Share, it breaks up your lecture. If you think about attention spans have definitely decreased with technology. And so you generally think, oh, well, an attention span of a person is you get 1 minute per year of life. And so if you're teaching 20-year-olds, their attention span is 20 minutes, give or take 5 minutes. So something like this can really break up the monotony of your class. Okay, After class, one of the things that you can do to make your students more successful is have more transparently designed assignments. And so transparent assignments just mean that you have specifically stated the purpose of the assignment, the task that students are to complete, and you lay out the criteria for success. And so the criteria for success can even include examples of sample work. That's very, very effective. And so if they know why they're doing this, if they know what they're supposed to do, and then they can see an example of what successful work looks like, they're far more likely to do well. If you think about the work that you've had to do before, if you could see an example or read an example or hear an example, you probably were a lot more likely to be enthusiastic about completing the work. So this is just an example. This is an example assignment that I teach in my geology class. And so and they can read the template of the report that they have to write. They can read the example report that I provide for them so they can see what they're supposed to be doing. This is another example of an assignment that I have, and this particular assignment takes all semester. And so we go through the entire project step by step, week by week, but it just makes sure that your expectations are written and are very clear, especially in terms of completing the assignment. For this example assignment, if they do not show up for their poster presentation, they get a 0, and a 0 is 0 points for the entire project. And so that really eliminates a lot of students who say, oh, well, I didn't know I had to show up to give my presentation. And I said, well, yes, it's in the assignment. So being very clear can be helpful to a lot of students. This also has really helped cut down on last minute emails and panicked questions from students. So if they understand what they're supposed to do, they can see what they're supposed to do, they see what it's supposed to look like, then they don't send questions like, does this have to be double spaced? Or what kind of poster do I need to make? They know because I've laid it out for them. It's specific and clear as possible. Okay. Does anyone already do something like this or provide examples already? It depends on the class you teach, because if you're teaching something with an exam, it's a little bit more difficult to provide an exam example, obviously. But if you have papers or any sort of creative activity, sometimes it's a lot better. Yeah, so something like drawing that would be challenging, Lissa. Yes, absolutely. So, and I have found that too. Sometimes I think that if I provide just one example, they follow that particular example. But if I provide 6 or 8, I teach how to make a poster and how to design a scientific poster. And so I have found that the more examples I give them, they are a little bit more creative because they see the wide range of possibilities that they can create. Yeah, so Monique says, yeah, so sometimes Monique gets replicas instead of creativity. Yes, and that does happen sometimes, yes. Yep. So, and a lot of it depends on your course. But sometimes it can help, and then sometimes it can just help them see what it looks like. Okay. So if you don't provide examples, can you think of your assignment and think of ways to make the assignment more clear or just more transparent with what you want them to do? Okay, listed as demonstrations. Okay, good, good. So demonstrations always help me. And I mean, for me, I learn by example, and that's why I tend to include a lot of examples because I like to see what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, so demonstrations, examples, those are always really helpful for a lot of people. Yes, I agree, Monique. Okay, so thinking of what we just talked about, what 3 things can you try this week or next week in your class? What can you try that maybe is new? And maybe it will fail, and that's okay. Maybe it's not going to work, but what can you try? Okay, so Bruno is going to modify the language of the syllabus. Okay. Okay, Monique's going to change office hours to student help. Good, good. Okay, Monique's going to give students an opportunity to connect to the content through art. Oh, interesting. Monique, what classes do you teach again? Oh, biology, chemistry, and geoscience. Very nice. Yeah, everyone thinks, oh, if you're a scientist, you don't have to be creative or you don't have to be a good artist, and that's not true. You have to, as a geologist, I have to draw all the time. Okay, so Lissa said, have the students interact through think, pair, share, rather than me talking out of fear of silence. Absolutely, Lissa. So a lot of us fill up the time with talking. And sometimes students just need time to think. And so you can say, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think about this. And then at the end of 2 minutes, I'll give you a signal to talk about it with the person around you. And then we'll come together as a group. And so that helps me. I'm very introverted. I need time to think. I'm not a quick thinker at all. Yeah, so Lissa, definitely silence is hard, and a lot of people, including me, can be uncomfortable with the silence, and it's okay because sometimes you just need time to think. Okay, anyone else going to try something new? Okay, Joshua wants to try all of these things. Okay, good. Uh, yeah, so Joshua, you teach kinesiology. Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to do all of these things all next week. Sometimes if you change too much, it's hard to know what's actually working. So give one thing a try. If it works, then maybe come back to it in a couple weeks. So, and sometimes you try something and it fails miserably. I've certainly tried things that did not work, uh, but I found that out. It was an experiment. So And students change also. So some things that work in one section of your class may not work with another section. If you have a section of your class that's really, really introverted, this happens to me all the time, and another section where everyone wants to talk and give their opinion, then some things just don't work even across the same class. And that's okay. Okay, so I told you a couple slides ago that I had some examples with some links. So the equity-minded syllabus, that whole idea, I went to a conference last year, and this is where I learned about the equity-minded syllabus. And it's a project out of the University of Northern Colorado. And so it's the Fisher and Keenan group. And so there are two links here for the tips to create a more inclusive syllabus. And then there are also examples of modified syllabi to look at the before and the after, and you might get some ideas. Because one of the classes is a biology class where they include a lot of really good photos and graphs, and it's really interesting visually to look at. So it's interesting. And there are also more examples and templates for transparent assignments. If you're trying to make your assignments a little bit more clear, if you want to provide more examples of student work in your assignments, there are some examples in this Tilt Higher Ed link here. Okay, so anyone have any pressing issues they have in their classes that they just, if you're like, I don't think this is going to work, I need some more ideas. Anyone have anything else they really need help with their teaching? Yes, Lisa, so I will share my slides, and then I think they'll probably just send them out to you. So you can absolutely, I'll share my slides so that you can all have them. No other problems in your classes? You're all amazing professors. Yeah, so Lisa, teaching remotely when you don't know if students are even there because their camera is off is a challenge, yes. Yeah, you don't know if they're typing, you don't know if they're even in front of their computer, if they're even awake. It's so difficult. This is my first semester back teaching in person. You know, I taught remotely for a year and a half, and I'm so grateful to be back in person because, yes, I dealt with the same thing teaching remotely. And the only thing that I really found that worked is just constant asking questions. Put in the chat, put in the chat. Yeah, so it's really difficult. Yeah, and labs, online labs, Monique, I don't know how you do online labs. It's just, oh, it's so difficult. So, um, so for you, Lissa or Monique, are you or do you think you're going to be teaching in person eventually, or are you just strictly going to be teaching remotely or online? Oh, online charter. Oh, it's tough. It's really, really tough. Yeah. So I hope you get to teach in person eventually. Okay, so Lissa, Okay, so Lissa, inappropriate comments in the chat. Is that what's happening? Okay, so I mean, you, if it's inappropriate, you can just say if you are going to share something inappropriate, there are a couple things you can do. If it's inappropriate in terms of uh, racist or sexist, then you can say that is not acceptable. And if you do that one more time, you are going to be dismissed from the course. There are a couple of different things you can do that. You can also, um, you know, talk to the student outside of course, outside of class, and ask them what's going on, why they're being inappropriate, or tell them that they're being inappropriate. Maybe they don't understand that they are. So you can either call it out immediately when it's happening and show that it's not, that you're not going to accept it. You can also address it with the student individually. Have you addressed it individually or while it's happening in class, Lissa? Okay. Yeah. So if, and sometimes I'm similar in that sometimes things happen, or sometimes students will say something and I'm so shocked that they say something so inappropriate that I can't think quickly enough. Talking about introverts and not thinking quickly, I can't think quickly enough to address it immediately. But you can have the can term that is inappropriate and that is not acceptable. So you can say that immediately, or send an email afterward and say, we need to talk about this. This is not acceptable. So, and hopefully that ends it. Has that worked? Has the inappropriate comments, have those ended after you addressed it? Okay. Yeah, so, they may just be testing you. It's hard to really know what's happening. But you also don't want to, if they're quiet for the rest of the semester, it just may be how it is. But at least it's not an inappropriate environment for the rest of your class. So, um, it's unfortunate if they don't talk again, but you can't sacrifice the rest of the class culture either. Okay. Anyone else have any pressing issues or questions? If you need any help anytime, you are welcome to contact me. My office is over here in MPEA. My email is here. If you ever want some help or advice, you are always welcome to email me, and I'm always happy to meet with you virtually, in person, and talk about some things that might help you or might work. If you need, like Lissa, if you need additional advice, I'm happy to talk a little bit more in detail, or any of you. Okay, I've been doing this a while. Some things work, some things don't, but I think that you're all here willing to learn, and that shows a lot. So Good for you for trying to be a better teacher. I'm sure your students all appreciate it. Okay, well, that's all I have. If anyone else has any questions, please let me know. And thank you for coming and joining us today.